Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Over the last decade, I've been on a spiritual journey to find purpose, inner peace, and fulfillment. You guys know that I've battled addiction, I've lost love, I've ended a lucrative career that was no longer satisfying. And over that process, I've studied many of the greats and the gurus. But it took me nearly 40 years to realize that the greatest spiritual guide of my life shares my own blood. My special needs sister, Mary. In today's episode, I'll be sharing with you 4 of the greatest spiritual lessons that Mary has ever taught me. And by the way, this podcast episode is a precursor to a TED Talk I plan on doing on the very same topic. And as I've been filling out applications, most of the TED conferences ask the following question. How is your idea new, original, visionary, mind-blowing, or a fresh approach to existing issues? And my answer is this. To my knowledge, there is little to no history of referring to those with special needs as spiritual guides. This is a realm that we've typically reserved for the able-minded. My talk in this episode proposes the elevation of our special needs brothers and sisters who we foolishly relegated to lower classes in the spiritual hierarchy to higher ground where they rightfully belong. I know you're going to enjoy today's episode. 4 spiritual lessons from my special needs sister, Mary. Dude, I'm pretty pumped about where the rest of this day is about to head. My first trip down to your new digs in Philadelphia, man. We got an adventure planned for tonight, don't we?
We do have an adventure. We are going to party Philly style. That said, I haven't partied Philly style, so I don't know what exactly that looks like, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like either. And I've got an ayahuasca trip coming up in a week in Costa Rica, which means I have to eat clean, no alcohol. So I don't know how we can party Philly style with clean eating without drinking, but I guess we'll figure that out.
It's not a problem. I'll Google it. How do you party Philly style without alcohol and staying clean for ayahuasca? That's what I'm going to Google.
Yeah, something tells me there are going to be 0 Medium articles outlining how we do that. Yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to getting today's episode. We're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is my sister Mary. One of the things that I've come to reflect on in recent years is that I've studied a lot of gurus, masters, experts over the years in various fields, spiritual and otherwise. You and I are big fans of Michael Singer and his spiritual work, Eckhart Tolle, Osho, read all their works. And then Napoleon Hill, I consider to be like one of my greatest mentors, even though, he's not been alive for many decades. But there's been no greater spiritual guide in my life than my sister Mary. And, one of the things I shared with you is this is going to be my next TED Talk, which is going to be called Spiritual Lessons for My Special Needs Sister. I've written down a list of many spiritual lessons that she's taught me, but we're going to go through 4 of them today.
I remember I went to see you a few years back at a keynote speech at Goldman Sachs, and you crushed it. You did all the stuff. You taught people not to use their cell phones anymore. You taught them all other kinds of great financial stuff. But it wasn't until you got to this story about your sister Mary and Miss Stern that the room was just captivated.
It's funny that you remember her teacher, Mrs. Stern, is actually Mrs. Unrath. Unrath, the Wrath of Unrath, but Stern.
I think it's from Matilda.
Same. It's part of the same family, right? Same class picture.
It's a very descriptive name that makes sense for who the teacher was. Miss Stern. Yes, got it. This Unrath, right. But yeah, the room was captivated, and in that very business-focused keynote speech, it was the first time I and the people there felt your heart.
Yeah.
And that was so captivating, so beautiful, and such a great lesson.
Thank you for that, man. It was an edge for me to bring up my sister and to bring up something emotional in a very corporate financial service oriented environment. I spent 15 years working in those kinds of fields where they were very skeptical. People were very skeptical anytime you tried to bring in something emotional, right? Like, just give me the facts, give me something intellectual, give me something to optimize my life. I remember it was actually my first keynote speech at Cap Trust, which is a big financial services firm in the industry I played in for 15 years. They were the creme de la creme. They're widely considered to be like, the top advisory firm in that business. And I knew I had to do something different, something bigger and bolder. And they hired me for a 90-minute keynote speech, which is kind of unheard of. 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes is a long time to be on stage. So I remember I said, I want to tell this story about my sister. And at the end of it, after it was over, I had people coming up to me crying in the audience, telling me I touched their hearts. And many people in the audience had said they had special needs siblings or children. They could relate to me. And it was one of the things that brought Steve Wilt, who's one of the pillars of our mastermind and the work that we're doing, close to us. And, if it wasn't for telling that story, we wouldn't have this beautiful human being in our group. So that's the power of story. That's the power of Mary.
Maybe you could just give all of us, including myself here, a little bit about here's what we know. We know that Mary's your sister. We know that she's special needs. But it sounds just like your learnings and stories about Mary have evolved significantly in the past several years. It sounds like your relationship has too. What's your history with your sister Mary?
It's such a great question. And I think it's a great lead into the 4 spiritual lessons that she's taught me. So Mary doesn't have a convenient classification of special needs, right? So like Down syndrome, autism, she doesn't fall into any one of those buckets. The closest that we've ever come was from Mrs. Unrath, her 8th grade algebra teacher, who was she was the toughest teacher. And she had this reputation of being just brutal with pop quizzes and tough in her grading. But it was Mrs. Unrath was the one who found out that Mary is actually quite intelligent, but she has a processing delay. So it's slower for Mary to learn the same information, the information that we would learn at a quote normal speed. And so all throughout growing up, my sister and I couldn't have been more different. I grasped intellectual things very quickly. It took her longer. I was very athletic. Mary couldn't care less about athletics. I moved at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Like Christmas time, I would blow through all my presents. I would have them all unwrapped. Mary would still be unfolding the paper on her first present, I had no patience. Mary has the patience of a saint. We just could not be more different. And so when you ask about the relationship as a child, oftentimes, for me, I loved my sister, but I didn't understand her. And when we started going to the same school together, which didn't happen until 7th grade, I went to a separate school, K through 6. She went to a public school to get, her special needs, attention needs met. When we started going to school together in 7th grade, my relationship with her was one where I felt a big part of my relationship with her was shame. I was embarrassed because my sister used to talk to herself in the hallways. She would be disheveled. She would wear strange clothes. People would pick on her. And I was a really sensitive kid who didn't really know my way. And when I'd get picked on, or people would be like, hey, did you see what your sister did in the hallway today? Or hear what your sister did in class today? There was this distancing that I did from her. So, for many years of my life, I loved her and was ashamed of her. And then I felt shame for feeling ashamed of her. And as an adult, for my 20s, I was just kind of lost in my own world with, my own addiction and building my life in New York City, that I didn't really take an active interest in her. There's big periods, big chunks of my life that are blind to me around what was going on in her life and what she was doing on a daily basis. But the last 6 or 7 years, since I was in recovery and have really been on this big spiritual adventure in my life, I've started to see how my sister has been one of the greatest spiritual teachers, the greatest spiritual teacher of my life, and started to see her for the saint that she is, and I believe her to be. So yeah, our closeness, we could not be closer at this point in our life.
It sounds like you've shifted a lot. Has she changed since those days?
That's such a great question, man. The biggest thing that's changed about her is that 20 years ago, she found her calling, which was the baby whisperer. She's a daycare center counselor for infants, 6 weeks to 12 months of age. There's no crying child that can outlast my sister's patience and calming embrace. So 20 years of working in her calling. Think about that. If I could have been a New York Yankee, my biggest dream, play center field for the New York Yankees, that would have been my absolute dream. She's living that version every single day. She found a community where she moved out of my parents' home. She lives in a senior citizen's home of all places. That keeps like 10% of the units available for people with special needs. But my sister's skills as a natural born listener, patient listener, are a valuable commodity in a place where people have no shortage of time or stories. So they love my sister, Mary. And she's, for the first time, had a community of people who accept her. So what's changed with Mary, it's not that she's really changed. It's just that these parts of her that have always been there are now blossoming, are now being appreciated by those around her. And her heart is as big and shines as big as and as brightly as anyone's I've ever met in my life.
What was the moment? And I know we'll get into the four spiritual teachings here, but I'm always curious about the moment. Like, what was the moment where you're like, wait a second, like Mary has this thing figured out, this thing called life?
Okay, I'll answer that because it comes in the form of one of the spiritual teachings that she's given me. This was the third one I've written down, but we'll get to it first. One of the spiritual lessons my sister has taught me is forgiveness is freedom. And what I mean about forgiveness here is my sister had been persecuted for many years of her life. She'd been othered. She'd been ostracized. She'd been picked on and teased. You know, the softball team when she was a kid didn't want her because she was a guaranteed out. The choir director, Mary loved to sing, would always put Mary in the back or take her out of songs because my sister doesn't have a great voice. I didn't really pay as much attention to her, didn't take an interest in her life. Mary has every reason to be resentful, every reason to carry a grudge, every reason to be upset. And she carries none of that. She's forgiven everybody, including me. And the moment that you're asking me about, I was on an ayahuasca journey 3 years ago, which if you don't know what ayahuasca is, it's a plant medicine that's been used in the Amazon for centuries to help heal, to help bring insights. It's a psychedelic medicine. And I went to this psychedelic journey because I wanted to explore my capacity to love and be loved. That was my intention. And it was really around romantic love because I'd been blocked, with intimacy. And so I go and, go on this journey. I sit down, the medicine kicks in, and all of a sudden, my sister visits me. And the best way I can explain it is actually like my sister, I became her. And I had a chance to fall like into her body and see the world and feel the world the way that she does. And my heart exploded. And I saw through her eyes the way she witnesses the world. It's almost like she sees people as colors, like these auras that shine brightly. And every person, like my mom or like a stranger, I could see her just like walk to them and want to hug them and love on them. Like her first instinct is love, is joy. And I felt what she felt with babies, and how she feels when she holds them close and all the sensations of the warmth and the innocence and the potential. So I felt her. And then, Bri, like this was the most intense part of the experience. I had a chance to see my relationship with her throughout all the years where I didn't understand her and I shunned her and I distanced myself from her. I was embarrassed by her. All these tears, it like tore my heart open and I was shaking, full body convulsions. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like this shaking, like this trauma release where it was like this forgiveness. My sister, like I could see that my sister held none of that against me. And I used to feel this sense of guilt that if my parents were to pass, that my sister then would become my responsibility. And like that would cramp my lifestyle, my freedom. And I knew that that would be my responsibility, but I felt so much guilt around the fact that that's how I responded to it. And then that left me and I could see my sister didn't hold that against me. And I could see my sister and I just growing older together, just her and I, getting gray hairs and having this beautiful adventure for the rest of our lives. And the thing was, Mary had forgiven me. Actually, there was nothing to forgive me for, like she never held it against me in the first place. And when I came down from that journey, it was like a part of my heart. The ayahuasca medicine said to me, hey, if you want to learn how to love and be loved, dummy, you've had the greatest teacher sitting next to you for 4 decades. Now you have a chance to see her and this gift for forgiveness of letting go of carrying any resentments. And Mary lives one of the freest lives of anybody I know because she has every reason to hold that and doesn't. So that was my moment.
It sounds like you already knew. And I'm wondering, can you have a conversation? Have you had conversations about that experience or about what came from that experience with Mary?
I've tried, and I've brought that forward. And I was just like, Mary, I had this experience and I had a chance to feel your heart and this is what happened. And I love you. And it made me realize how much I love you and how much I've missed parts of your life. And I want to be a big part of it. And she will absorb the feeling. You know what I mean? The words, maybe not as much as like the feeling that's coming off of me. And what she said is she'll go, aw, like, oh, that's beautiful. And there's not a lot of words behind it, but Mary is attuned to the feelings. And so I know it's not about the words that I say, it's about the feelings. And so she gets that.
I love that. It sounds like she's practically always present with the feeling that's happening in the moment.
Which is a perfect segue to the second spiritual lesson that she's taught me, which is make joy a priority. Joy as a priority. Now, there is, Bri, no human being that had even come close to the consistent happiness and joy that my sister lives in minute by minute. She is the most present human being that I know. If we were to call her right now, she'd jump on the phone. Hello. Like that's like whenever we pick her up to take her to work in the morning, she comes bouncing and bounding out of the home with like a ridiculous outfit on and she's smiling and she'll see, even if she's tired, it's like, hi. I mean, my sister always is smiling and people will say this to me. I had a conversation with Brad Barrett this morning from the Choose at 5 podcast. He was like, you could see it in the pictures that you post of her, right? She's just smiling always. Okay, that's the end result. Like I can see that she's always happy and she's always joyful. So I got really curious. I became kind of an archaeologist of how does one become that joyful? And I look at my sister's life and where most of us feel like joy has to come at the end of some long journey of hard work or grind or some achievement, Mary puts that at the center of her life. And whereas I might think that like cultivating joy or pleasure in my life could be selfish or could be like a waste of time or it's a barrier to me getting things done, Mary would never see joy as a waste of her time. It's actually the highest order. So Brian, in the morning, when she grinds her coffee beans, which is a ritual she loves, she puts it in the red French press because red and pink are her favorite colors. She's got a red toaster, a pink microwave. Her bedroom looks like a bottle of Pepto-Bismol has exploded. Like all of these things give her joy. She goes to work and she deals with the baby. She comes home and she does puzzles because that gives her joy. And then she goes to the Senior Citizens Community Center and plays Pokino and Canasta, these old school card games. Joy, 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 stacked up, stacked up, stacked up. It's a no wonder that she lives in that constant state of contentedness.
The first time I met Mary, it reminded me of, have you ever been on the subway and you saw a baby and the baby was just staring at you in the eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Like no shame, just pure curiosity, pure there in the moment. It reminded me of that exact same energy. I was like, she is so here right now and down for whatever.
Down for whatever. That's the thing. Like, and all Mary wants is your attention. That's it. Like all she wants is your attention. And if you give it to her, she's happy. And if you think about some of the conversations we've been having in the Mastermind lately, Bri, there's a lot of guys who are successful, achievers. And the one area of our lives that's missing is that play, that pleasure, that joy. I even look at my life. It's so fully optimized. I've got my morning routines, my evening routines. I've got like healthy eating. I've dialed in my nutrition. I've got my meditation and breathwork techniques, like you name it. I know what it's like to be fulfilled. Like I live a very fulfilling life and I live a very loving life. I have intimacy and connections, but it's actually really, really underweight pleasure and joy and play. And I have not prioritized that. It's a totally foreign muscle. Like foreign when I say it's been decades since I've really, really made that a priority. As a kid, I knew how to do that. But now I have to look at Mary and actually have her teach me.
How often do you think, what would Mary do in this situation? How would she handle this? If you start smiling a lot more, I know where it's coming from.
Yes, because like she's always smiling. And so what would Mary do is a constant question that I've started to ask. And one of those insights, and I hope our listeners can really hear this one too, is Mary does not have a lot of clutter in her life. Like her job, she gets to leave it at the door when she leaves, like there is no homework from nurturing babies. Like once that day is done, it's done. Then she has tons of space. She has created space for her to go play, whether it's puzzles, card games, hanging out with her friends at the Senior Citizen Center, taking walks around, Ramsey, New Jersey, where we live, where my family lives. So I'm now looking at my life. There's a lot of clutter. There's a lot of work that I have to do. And I've signed up for that. I've created that and I can get it all done. But when I get to the weekends, my weekends are recovery. It's not actually playtime. I don't even schedule anything because it's like, man, if I were to go play or do something, I might be exhausted and that may set me back. And then I can't even meet my requirements for Monday or Tuesday. So I've now looked at really, really downscaling a lot of the work that I've been doing and prioritizing play.
If you asked Mary in your free time, what do you like to do? What would she say?
I love to go walking. I love to do puzzles. She loves watching Netflix. All her favorite shows on Netflix, like Full House, The Steve Urkel Show, whatever that is, Family Matters, Seventh Heaven. She's seen these fucking shows like 1,000 times,
Dude, it sounds like you two aren't that different.
Not respect. Yeah. We both have our shows. They're just completely different shows that we like to watch. But yeah, we both like watch them over and over again and get pleasure. But those are the things that she loves to do.
And then what would Dominic say? What does Dominic like to do in his free time?
Right now, my free time, it's like, I just like to relax, to work out, maybe take a walk, to the parks. And those are relief things. Like I did the podcast called Relief is Not the Same Thing as Pleasure. If I ask you to stand on a tree trunk on one leg and balance a 200-pound boulder on your back, which is like an analogy for how a lot of our lives, the pressures, the responsibilities, the balancing act of one leg. When I come and take that boulder off your back and put the leg down, that's relief. That feels better than what you were just doing. Not the same thing as getting off that tree trunk and going exploring the forest with your buddies and getting into some trouble and mixing it up. You may not have the energy to do that after carrying that boulder on one leg. So for me, I don't know right now. Like you and I have talked about this last night. I would love to get back on a sports team and compete and play, whether it's volleyball. Brad Barrett talked about how last night he played his first pickleball game, 2.5 hours. Loved it.
It's so wild that we have to reteach ourselves how to enjoy, how to figure out what we actually want, because we've been so focused on what we have to do.
That's it.
To get it done, to get to happiness as opposed to be at happiness. And Mary is such a good reminder of that. Why are we doing all these things? Can we enjoy it along the way?
Exactly. I mean, the whole reason why I feel like I'm doing so many of these things is because I want to be happy. I also want to be fulfilled. And I've got that. I've got that box checked. I also want to feel love. And I've got that box checked. I feel like a billionaire around, male relationships in my life and closeness in my life. But the joy and the play part is something that I have not prioritized. And so Mary is going to be my spiritual guru in that regard.
You told me yesterday that you wanted to go to a water park. So I think that's fair. I would throw that in the pleasure and joy category. What's your go-to thing at a water park?
So it's not just any water park. It's the most dangerous water park in the world called Action Park. If any of you have ever heard of it, it's in Vernon, New Jersey. You could throw Six Flags in the trash, Disney World in the trash. There was no greater theme park than an Action Park. And it was the most reckless, irresponsible designed park. They had to buy their own ambulances because they had so many people who were taken away on a daily basis, with injuries, that they overwhelmed the town of Vernon. The volunteer.
Are you sure this place is still open?
They've rebranded it. I think it's called Mountain Valley Water Park or something like that. It's under new ownership. There's a documentary on HBO Max called Class Action Park because there were so many class action lawsuits. But dude, it was so irresponsible. I saw a guy get his head cracked open on one of the rides there, bloodbath, but the rides were outrageous. It was so much fun and you felt freedom. So what do I want to go on there? They have a cliff jump and they also have this speed slide that is this impossible, almost straight down slide that
you may fly off. There's a chance.
They have to put this netting in front of the first 6 feet of the slide so that it'll push you back if you fly off of it. And then you go so fast that the urban legend is you will be picking parts of your bathing suit out of your crack for the next, for the rest of the decade, basically.
Oh, man. And when's the last time you were at this park?
I was 15. They have a Tarzan swing there. Tarzan swing is legendary.
As a kid, water parks were spot on. And now I drive by them on the highway. I'm like, that looks disgusting.
Disgusting and cheesy.
And
they're
right.
wimpy rides. No, so I already reached out to Keith Bracci this morning, and I said, let's go. And he's down for it. So that's going to be something that happens like in a couple of weeks.
This reminds me of Paul Walker. He died driving, I think, his favorite car. I don't know exactly what this surrounded, but there was a lot of talk after his death about how he died doing what he loves. And there was no other way that he'd want to go out. Like, unfortunately, he died early. We didn't get to see Paul Walker grow old. But there was a lot of talk about how cool is that you can just die while doing what you absolutely love.
I'd love that. Just hopefully when I'm 120, you know?
Right. Not at Action Park next week.
Yeah, not at Action. I'd hope not. I got work to do, man. Actually, I've got joy to live is what I'd rather say.
There it is.
So here's another spiritual lesson that my sister has taught me. This one's big. Receiving begets abundance. Receiving begets abundance. Here's what that means. There's no one in my life that I've experienced who does a better job of receiving gifts, praise, support than my sister Mary. Now, when Mary receives a gift, like I'll buy her Shania Twain tickets, which actually I bought for her for this year's birthday. She doesn't know this yet, but Shania Twain's performing in Las Vegas. And we've seen 2 Shania Twain concerts here, but we've never taken a trip together. So I'm going to be taking her out to Vegas to take that to the next level. When I present her with these tickets, she's going to go bananas. And then she's going to be thanking me and sending me text messages for weeks leading up to this thing. I just bought a Shania Twain t-shirt. I just did research on Vegas. I'm playing Shania Twain on my Spotify. She lets it in fully. She lets it in all the way, and she feels no obligation to return the favor. There's no, oh my God, this was too much. Oh my God, how much money did you spend? Oh my God, we're going to Vegas. How do I return that for you in some equal form? There's no ledger. She just lets that all the way in, receives it, and then explodes the joy back so that I get blasted with her love, and all I want to do is find new ways to surprise and delight her.
Yeah, how much fun is that? To see that kind of reaction? Oh.
Right? So I looked at this, and I'm like, it's not just a me thing. The people all around her do the same thing. So for her Christmas, I bought her one of these special silicone baby dolls that look like, almost like a real doll. And my sister brings that freaking doll everywhere that she goes. She brings it to the supermarket, puts it, she brings it everywhere. And so all of the women at the Senior Citizen Center, it seems like every one of them know how to crochet and knit because that was the generation where they taught that. There have been 6 different women who have crocheted baby outfits for my sister's doll, right? They just give it to her. And Mary loves it, feels no responsibility of having to return the favor. She just dresses the baby doll up in those outfits. And then, when the woman sees the thing that she knitted on Mary's doll, she feels the payback of, wow, Mary really loves my creation. You know what I'm saying?
I love this.
She lets it all in. And my sister's the luckiest human being on the planet. When she plays bingo, she wins. She goes to the slot machine, she wins. She came back from a freaking cruise one time. We picked her up at the port with my parents in New York City. And we're at my apartment and my parents are talking. My sister's sitting next to me. She goes, hey, Domino, look at this. She calls me Domino. She pulls out of her pocket this gangster roll of $100 bills, wrapped in rubber bands. She just won $3,000 at the bingo on the ship.
It's no wonder you're taking her to Shania Twain in Vegas.
Right.
You're swing by the slots on the way there.
Right. So there's this thing, man, where she just wins stuff all the time. She enters puzzle contests. During COVID, she won 60 puzzles worth thousands of dollars from it's over and over and over again. And so I look at Mary's a full body yes to receiving. She thanks blasts with gratitude, whatever comes to her, and feels no obligation or debt or lack of worthiness. And when you compliment her on her clothes, her outfits, she's just like, thank you, and stands there in the radiance of it. And so it just begets this abundance because other people want to feed that. They feel great around that.
Does she have pink sparkly boots?
Yes, exactly. Uggs.
I think that's what she was wearing when I met her.
Mm-hmm.
Because I said something, I'm like, those boots are amazing. And she gave me the big, thank you. That was it. That feels so freeing.
Right?
I think about how I react often to gifts. And my first thought goes to, do I owe this person something? Was this too much? Do I feel bad about it? Right? That's where I first go. My dad has gotten a lot better at receiving gifts as he's gotten older, but the running joke in the family was, be it Christmas, be it birthday, it didn't matter. It was being returned. It was going to go back to the store.
Ooh.
And so it got to a point of like, should we even get Dad a gift? I don't really know. And so it's so cool to see somebody go, wow, like that's amazing. And it sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong, Dom, but it sounds like it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a crocheted piece of clothing. It could be a ticket to Shania. It could probably be something you whittled with a stick.
It's amazing how few limitations she puts on what she's willing to receive. What she's willing to receive is like your acknowledgement, your praise, your thoughtful gesture towards her. This is the thing. Mary is very obvious about the things that she likes. So she ends up receiving a lot of those things.
Wait. Go back to that. Like, what is obvious look like?
So obvious is like, she tells everybody that she loves Shania Twain. She tells everybody she loves babies. She carries her baby doll around with her everywhere. I love pink. She wears pink. She puts it on blast. I mean, you have to do no thinking at all about what she likes.
Dude, put what you love on blast. I love it. That is a lesson that we can all take home.
Put what you love on blast. Maybe that's another spiritual lesson that she taught. Yeah. Because that leads to this last one, man. And you brought this up with the pink sparkly boots is the last spiritual lesson that I had written down is different is beautiful. Different is beautiful. For many years of my sister's life, early years, different was ostracized. Different was outcast. Different was lonely. Different was to be made fun of. Different was to be looked down upon. And my sister is different in nearly every aspect of, normal society functioning's life or rules. But what makes Mary so beautiful are these areas where she's different. When Mary walks into a room and she's wearing like rainbow tie-dye pants and pink sparkly boots and like cat sweatshirts, like the big cat face on the sweatshirt. and she just and she just walks into a room. She looks ridiculous by normal standards, right? But she's got this glow. She knows that no one else dresses like her and she loves that. And so she will walk and stop in a room and stand there and impose her will of happiness upon you until you can't help but laugh. And it's such a beautiful thing to watch her own that so that everyone else around kind of is like, wow, I wish I had that much freedom in my self-expression.
When you were describing how she dressed, the first two articles of clothing reminded me a lot of Katie Bunny, who's a friend of ours. But that's someone I think of that is like, wow, like they are living their own life and how much freedom do they have in just doing what they want to do.
Yeah, Katie Bunny, I mean, she's a fire performer. Like, what do you call that? Like she has like a stick and then, twirls the fire.
She's been living in Costa Rica for the past 2 years, just living life on a retreat. Every time I see a post on Facebook, I'm like, that's amazing.
Her life is a retreat. And actually, the first time I ever met her, she's like, you need some, what is it called? Like eyeshadow or something like that. She puts like rocker eyeshadow on me. Every time that's like our ritual. She takes some of that stuff out and puts like punk rock eyeshadow on me and I go out to the party. But different is beautiful has helped me to kind of own parts of myself that are weird and strange and then to just put that on blast.
Can you tell us the weird and strange parts of you?
Shouldn't you be able to identify those things?
I can definitely. I have a list of 10 of them. I didn't know if you were self-aware or not.
Why don't you tell me, what are some of the weird things that you associate with me?
Oh, man. Weird things I associate with Dom. And also, these are things I appreciate about you. So I hope you do put them on blast. You love experimenting and tinkering with like new biohacking ways to live sort of stuff. Like you're on the edge.
Yep.
That's one weird thing about you. What else?
Talk a lot about my sex life and sex stuff, dick stuff.
Yeah. You're the only person that's ever had a porn gate as far as I know. Mm-hmm. What else, man? What else comes up? You get really giddy when you get excited about something, which sounds like no shit, but you turn into a little kid.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yeah, let's do that. You have that mischievous part of you.
Yeah, those parts, I mean,
you love tank tops or cutoffs.
Yeah, tank tops are my thing.
Tank tops and cutoffs. And listen, you got the body, so do it.
Well, I remember when I was working in financial services, like I remember being so bored by everyone wearing navy suits and charcoal suits and pinstripe suits. It was just like, everything was so boring. And I remember like, I wore my first pink shirt and I got made fun of for that. I bought a purple blazer got made fun of for that. But like, it made me feel like, I can bring some life to this lifeless arena, you know, like I felt like my sister Mary in the sense of walking into all these colorless spaces and then just seeing people get agitated by it or people get excited by it. And I was like, man, if I could just bring more of myself to these spaces, like how much more adventurous and enjoyable is that? So yeah, I like bringing unconventional things to places to stir shit up.
Have you ever let Mary dress you?
Oh God. You know what? That's a great idea.
This is a thing that should happen.
You know what she would do? She would love to paint my fingernails.
Awesome.
When we were kids, we have a babysitter. His name was Peter Lang. And she painted his fingernails once, and she will not stop telling that story. It's like 30 years old now. Do you remember the time I painted Peter's fingernails and like it was pink? Domino, do you think you'd let me paint your nails? Domino, do you think you'd wear pink sparkly Uggs? Holy shit, this is a great idea.
I mean, just a suggestion, but when you do the TED Talk, my suggestion is go with the outfit she picks out.
I'm not going to wear that on stage. How about this? I will have a picture that I will put on the presentation. I will guarantee you I will do this.
Love it.
I will do the Mary Dresses Me Day, and I'll have a picture to put up on for the presentation.
I can't wait to see it.
Okay. All right, dude. Well, I think this has been an awesome conversation. I'll wrap this up with just a summary of the 4 spiritual lessons that Mary has taught. The first one we talked about is forgiveness is freedom. Mary doesn't burden herself with resentment, anger, jealousy, anything that she carries around, even though she has every right to be. Number 2, Mary has made joy a priority in her life. Everything that she does is oriented around joy first and everything else second. And she's the happiest human being I know. Third spiritual lesson is receiving begets abundance. So she allows all of that in. She's worthy of it. She thanks. She blasts you with gratitude. She puts whatever she loves on blast. So she, the world knows what to bring her and she feels no obligation to return. And then the fourth is different is beautiful. Mary flies her freak flag proudly in every situation that she walks into, and she's amused by it when other people are amused by her, and she revels in that.
Knowingly. I love that. It's not just like, oh, I'm different. It's like knowingly different.
And proud of it.
So Don, those 4 lessons are beautiful, and something that's coming to me is wondering if Mary has fear. Have you ever seen her express fear? Because all of these things feel like if you're different, like the flip side of some of these things, like letting go, no resentment, and forgiveness of being an outcast, as you described, or dressing differently could feel like an othering or being a lonely. And I'm curious, have you ever seen her express fear or loneliness or some of these other negative emotions?
Man, it's so powerful that you bring this word fear in, because like I'm racking my brain over like the last decade or so to just find a moment where I saw Mary afraid. Mary does not live her life in fear. There's like very little anxiousness in her life whatsoever. And how is that possible? Mary is perfectly calibrated to what brings her joy. She's very clear about her boundaries. Like, there's a stupid one, a simple one, but like the other night she was telling me that she was going to watch this movie Blast from the Past, which was like the 6th time she's watched it in the last few weeks. And I'm like, Mary, is there anything that you don't watch like a gazillion times? And she looked at me and she said, baseball. Like she doesn't like baseball. I love baseball. And she said it with a smile on her face. Like there's no judgment towards me. She's just very clear that like, this is the thing that she likes. And this is the line where she doesn't like it. And that goes with the things that she would be afraid of too. So she spends so little time worrying. Now there may be a circumstance in the future that like requires her to do something that brings fear, but my God, it's actually kind of amazing how absent fear is from her life. Yeah,
because it makes me think, what would Mary do in these situations? Maybe it's actually less about doing and more about just identifying like really what our fears are. Because if we can live absent of that, of course we're going to live in joy. Of course we're going to live in forgiveness. There's nothing to fear.
That's a really great question, man. I'll have to do some deeper digging on that because it's sometimes hard to identify the absence of something. And the fear, when you brought that up, I was like, wow, I guess I could almost put her on that pedestal of like, I don't know how many other people live with as little fear or anxiety as my sister, which is also one of the contributing factors as to how present she is. That presence oftentimes is shattered because of fear. I'm consumed with something that I've got to get done, or I'm worried about the thing that just happened. And she's just like, that stuff just rolls right off of her.
Beautiful way to live.
All right, this is your call to action to take this conversation about the 4 spiritual lessons that my special needs sister Mary has taught me. I'd love to know, what's a takeaway that you have? Even if it's as simple as, I'm going to ask myself, what would Mary do in this situation? Or are you going to fly your freak flag and embrace the fact that difference is beautiful? Are you going to make joy a priority? Or anything else that you took away from this conversation? What is the one thing that you're going to put into practice in your life? And when you know what that is, or when you've done that, please come over to the Facebook group, share that with us. Nothing would mean more to me than to know how my sister's influence has upgraded your life. And you'll see me there in the Facebook group, loving on whatever you bring.